Alright you guys, as promised, here is the ColecoVision. As you can see, it's in really good shape. I get really lucky with these things. I find them they're in really good shape. Other than the gray top part of that's missing, this thing's pretty much in perfect shape. So let's go over the system. Now the ColecoVision came out in August of 1982. And it wasn't around for very long, which is kind of strange because a lot of games came out for it. It was definitely powerful for the time, and it actually sold 6 million units, over 6 million units. So it sold a lot of units. It sold pretty quickly, and yet only a few years after coming out, this thing was canned. So it just came out late. There was a video game crash, of course, around 1984. So, I mean, this only had a few years. Despite being pretty good, it was not able to fight off the crash, and it went down with all the rest of the systems. So anyways, the system itself has similar controllers to an Intellivision. And like the Intellivision, they're stored in the system. Luckily, unlike the Intellivision, the original Intellivision, they are removable. So there's your controller port in there. You can change the controllers out. You hold it similar to a Intellivision controller, except your D-pad's up top. You have the number pad with the optional, what do they call them there? The overlays there that match the game. So the overlays slide in this slot here on the side. Once again, very similar to the Intellivision controller. You got a button on each side, and then you have somewhat of a little joystick here. So it's a little better to use, I think, than the Intellivision controller, you know, having the little joystick. The joystick's definitely nice, and like I said, you can change out the controllers. So there's the two controllers. Similar size and shape to the Intellivision, except they've moved both controllers over to one side, and then they've moved the slot load on top, which is a very good idea. Instead of the slot load on the side like it was in the Intellivision, it's just a simple top load. Of course, your power switch here, and a reset button here. And that's it. There's no extra buttons on it like a 2600 or anything like that. Now in the front you have an expansion module interface. It's basically another cartridge slot for expansion modules, which I'll show you later. This pops open like that, and you basically have a cartridge slot here that you can slide in the expansion module. And it's kind of neat that it has like its own little flap thing to cover itself up. So when you don't actually have the expansion module, you're not exposing the cartridge slot. And there's nothing on the sides of the system, but on the back we have pretty typical your channel select, your RF output, and the power. Now it's not a standard two-prong power adapter, and that's one problem with this system. Here's the power block here. Of course, it does end in a standard plug, so this is, you know, the brick would lie on the ground or whatever. Not internal power supply like the Intellivision. And to make matters worse, this is the end that plugs into the Intellivision. Like I said, it's not a standard two-prong, you know, center post style power supply where if it did go, you could try and find a universal one that matches, you know, the voltage and the wattage or amperage. This one's a weird 4-pin kind of thing. It's basically, you know, if you can find one of these now and it doesn't have a working power supply, finding that power supply would be harder than finding the system. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be an easy to find power supply, and you do need the power supply, obviously. It's not built in like the Intellivision. Now the games themselves are on these cartridges here. As you can see, I got a whole bunch of games with it. About a third of them are actually Atari 2600 games that he just gave me, but most of them are ColecoVision games. The cartridges are fairly similar to a 2600 cartridge, except that they're not spring-loaded door covered. They're exposed. No big deal. But otherwise, you know, same shape and size basically as your 2600 games. But you know, like I said, it is a top-load design. Very nice. Extra controllers. I've got a few. I've got these ones here, which have your action buttons in here and a joystick up top. And they also have overlays, which I have some of the overlays for these style controllers. And they just go on like so. They've got little grips for them. But I've got 3 of those. There's 2 more in there. So I got 3 of these kind of special controllers here. They call it the Super Action Controller. It's basically just an upgraded controller for some of the games. The other controller I got, which was considered one of the expansion modules, even though it's really just a controller, is the wheel here with the removable gas pedal. So as you can see there, a working gas pedal. And that just plugs into the controller port. Also we have the rolling controller. This has kind of like the trackball that you had in some arcades, like, you know, some of the bowling games and what was it, Missile Command, I think. Some of the old arcade games had, of course, the trackball. Now you can put your controllers in here, and then this plugs into the controller ports. So this plugs into both controller ports. The controllers can plug into here, and then it also has this bypass thing for the power. This is where your power would plug in from the power block, and then this would plug into the system. So it kind of steals some power from the power supply. It needs a little extra power for this, for whatever reason. Anyways, the most important module I've also got, and this is why he gave me some 2600 games with it. This is the expansion module number 1, the most common expansion module. As promised by ColecoVision, this lets the ColecoVision play 2600 Atari games. That's basically like, oh, I don't know, your Xbox coming out with, you know, an expansion module that lets it play PlayStation 3 games. There's, you know, all kinds of legal issues behind this. I can't believe this thing came out. I can't believe Atari didn't sue them. You know, they must have had some legal loophole that they got through. But this is basically a 2600 all in here. It's got all your switches, your color black and white, your difficulty switches, your game select, your reset, all the little switches and buttons that are on a 2600 are on here, as well as 2 2600 controller ports. So as you can see, it's got a little insert here, and that literally just plugs in there like that. So now not only can you play ColecoVision games, but you can play, that's ColecoVision. Oh, that's a shitty Atari game. We know that's an Atari game. E.T., the Atari game, I don't know which way it goes in. It goes in like that. You can play Atari 2600 games with the ColecoVision. Now, it's pretty stupid if you ask me, because it's basically its own little unit. I mean, other than it doesn't have, you know, power and video, it's got all the switches, and you're plugging your 2600 controllers into it. But I guess it would have been cheaper than buying another 2600, and you wouldn't have to unhook, you know, one system to the next. It definitely helps sell the ColecoVision in having the ability to play another large quantity of games. But overall, kind of weird.